In today's video, we have several NHL news updates to discuss, including a devastating injury to the defending champion St. Louis Blues. We have some news on the NHL Waiver Wire, and we have several NHL trade rumors to discuss amongst many NHL teams. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news to cover, so let's dive right in and get started. Now, I want to start with the NHL injury news that just broke out of the St. Louis Blues organization. The defending Stanley Cup champions are going to be without Vladimir Tarasenko for a minimum of 5 months. He does require shoulder surgery, and it's going to be reevaluated in 5 months' time, so likely could be out even potentially longer, depending on how everything goes with the surgery and the rehab, etc. So that's pretty much going to end his regular season. If you look at the calendar and go 5 months ahead, and he's only going to be reevaluated at that point, I mean, I guess, sometimes you do see injuries heal differently than they anticipated, so maybe there'll be some optimism for an earlier return, but really doubtful. I mean, it is possible as well, depending on how everything goes. If the Blues make the playoffs, maybe he could return in the playoffs at some point, but really this is a big blow. Obviously, Tarasenko plays a big role in that team, by far their best pure goal scorer, so obviously having him out of the lineup for basically the remainder of the NHL season is certainly going to be a big blow. So we'll see how the Blues respond. Obviously, they can use long-term injury reserve if necessary as well to kind of get around the salary cap if they need to try to add another player into the mix here. So we'll see how the Blues and Doug Armstrong responds. Armstrong is expected to have a news conference discussing this a little bit further tomorrow, but the announcement did come out of St. Louis today, and it's certainly some bad news for the defending Stanley Cup champions. Now, we also saw some other injuries as well with the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're going to be without defenseman Ryan Murray and young forward Alex Texier for a period of time as well. Ryan Murray, who's been mentioned in NHL trade rumors as a potential guy that the Blue Jackets could move on the blue line. It broke his hand. He's going to be out of action for about a month or so, and Alex Texier is going to be out for a few weeks too. So obviously the Blue Jackets are already, starting the year a little bit behind the eight ball here after all the mass exodus of players they had and a lot of that top offensive talent going out the door. To lose these two guys as well, certainly going to be a big blow for them for the next little while. So certainly some major injury news out of Columbus here as well. On the NHL Waiver Wire, we do have a player today who possibly could be picked up. The Calgary Flames have placed forward Tobias Reeder on NHL waivers, so obviously he has until noon Eastern time tomorrow where another team can put in a claim to claim him off the Flames. If he's not claimed, then he will be assigned to their American Hockey League affiliate. Toby Reeder did have a pretty decent preseason, got signed to a contract with the Flames, has played 9 games, he scored 1 goal so far, so it hasn't really lived up to it. Of course, he had a dreadful year last year with the Oilers, joined the Flames, got off to a decent start, but then has really cooled off and has yet to be able to regain that form that he looked like he was getting back earlier between the preseason and the first little bit of the NHL season. So we'll see if Toby Reeder ends up getting claimed or not, and who the Flames intend to replace him with in their lineup. Maybe they'll give another youngster, maybe like a Dylan Dubé or somebody, more of an opportunity, because they do have a couple of decent forwards in the American Hockey League that have been playing well and certainly deserve some more time at the NHL level. Now, of course, this past weekend we saw the Heritage Classic take place in a neutral location in Saskatchewan between the Winnipeg Jets and the Calgary Flames. Prior to the game, we did see an interview with Winnipeg Jets GM Kevin Cheveldayoff, and he was asked a lot of different questions, one of them around the return of Dustin Byfuglien, and his answer was kind of complicated. So we've had times when we've had news reports indicating that things were looking promising, that Byfuglien was, all signs were pointing to a return. We've had other reports indicating that it's not looking good at all, he's likely retiring, and we didn't really get any much clarity from the Winnipeg Jets general manager, but the fact that he's saying it's complicated really shows that there really is no clear-cut decisions, and it still leaves the Jets in a bit of a pickle here, unable to really take advantage of the cap space they're going to get from the relief of his contract being suspended, but at the same time, wondering if he's going to come back. So there's certainly creates a hole there on the blue line, and they also have youngster Ville Heinola, who they drafted in the first round of the 2019 NHL draft. Started off really solid for the Winnipeg Jets this year, filled in admirably on that blue line with all the the holes that were left there from all the mass exits of free agents and then Byfuglien not playing. They've had some injuries, created more of an opportunity for Heinola to step in and get his feet wet in the NHL. He's looked pretty good, but he's at that point now where he's played enough NHL games that if he gets into 1 or 2 more games, that it's going to activate the first year of his entry-level contract. So they need to decide what's best for his young development here in his young career, and it is quite possible that he may not remain with the Jets, that he could go back to his previous club and resume his junior hockey career for a little bit longer and can continue to develop before he continues to be a full-time NHLer. But he has looked pretty good. I think the Jets made a pretty good selection so far. He's looking like he's going to work out for them, but he likely needs some more seasoning before he's a full-time NHLer. So expect a decision on Heinola soon, likely here and probably in the next week or so, which also could make him eligible to play in the World Junior Championships to represent his country coming up over Christmas, which would be a big opportunity for him there as well. Now, with Heinola likely going back, and then, of course, you get the uncertainty with Dustin Byfuglien. There's been lots of talk about the Jets adding on the blue line, but like I said, they're kind of in a little bit of a bad predicament because of the cap and not being sure of Byfuglien's future, of where they might go, but could we possibly see the Jets trying to acquire a defenseman? Certainly wouldn't be a bad idea. It's just going to be a little bit tricky to do, and which we're going to segue into another team who might be looking to move a defenseman, and that team would be the Boston Bruins. Of course, the Boston Bruins have been playing extremely well. They've got a great start to the NHL season. The only thing is if the top line, the perfection line that they call between Bergeron, Pasternak, and Marchand, if they slow down, cool down, end up with any injuries, the Bruins could be in trouble. As much as they've played extremely well to start the year, that line's probably been the best line in the NHL. They're getting terrific goaltending under Tuukka Rask. They're winning, most of their games, which is great. But they're not really getting much help after that first line. David Krejci's been injured. Jake DeBrusk's had a bit of a slow start. And the other parts of their lineup are just not contributing a whole lot on the offensive side of the game. So there's been a lot of talk that the Bruins are very interested in acquiring someone who can play the wing and provide some offense. A lot of their younger players that they've given opportunities to just really haven't quite worked out. I'm not sure they have a lot of confidence right now in a guy like Anders Bjork to put in that position. So there's certainly lots of wingers out there that the Bruins could be looking at, and of course there's certainly different price tags that are going to come with that, and so it's certainly not really clear what they might do, but one link that's been with the Bruins is Rangers forward Chris Kreider. Of course, the Bruins and the Rangers have had deals before, so there's a bit of a history of trades taking place there, and of course Chris Kreider is a local Boston boy, growing up in the area, probably grew up a Bruins fan, and probably would welcome an opportunity to go to Boston. Of course, right now the New York Rangers, who many predicted would be much better this year, I know myself included, they're not as good as I thought they were going to be so far. A lot of their younger players obviously need more time to grow and develop, but clearly there's been no contract talks with Kreider with the Rangers. They're not playing well, so it looks as though maybe the Rangers GM and their staff might be end up selling off some more assets and continuing this rebuild a little bit longer before they're really able to take some major steps forward and become a playoff contender here yet again. And we've seen a lot going on with this team this year, so maybe Kreider could be somebody that the Bruins target. Of course, there's other guys out there like a Tyler Toffoli in LA. They're not having a good start. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. It's just going to boil down to the price tag, if they can squeeze it in under the cap, etc. But there's certainly a couple of players there that the Bruins could be looking at. But at the same time, they could be looking at some cheaper options, maybe like a Jesse Puljujarvi or a Josh Hosang or something to that effect. Those young wingers are well known to be on the trade market as well. But right now, with the Bruins winning and playing so well, with the top line carrying the big load, Don Sweeney doesn't have a ton of pressure to make a move. But like I said, if they run into any injury situations or if that top line cools down at all, they very well could have a bad stretch if they don't pick up the secondary scoring. Now, staying here with the Rangers momentarily, one of their top prospects, and one of the top prospects, in my opinion, from around the NHL is Vitaly Kravtsov, was loaned back to go back and play in the KHL. Now, of course, he, along with goaltender Igor Shesterkin, came over from Russia, signed their entry-level contracts earlier this year. We're expected to debut here with the Rangers during the 1920 NHL season. Of course, Shesterkin we knew likely was going to probably play in the American Hockey League. That's not a huge surprise. Obviously, within the goalie depth chart, that wouldn't have been a huge surprise for him to end up playing in that league rather than the NHL. But many people, myself included, thought Vitaly Kravtsov really had an excellent shot at making the Rangers roster. I wasn't sure that he'd be a full-time player right off the get-go, but at the very least, he'd be given an opportunity, and maybe by season's end, we'd see him kind of pick up, gradually increase to a bigger role and become a full-time player. I thought he looked to be ready from what I've seen of him last year, but obviously things didn't quite work out. The Rangers were not real pleased with him during the preseason and training camp. They sent him down to the American Hockey League, and even down there, he wasn't even playing on a regular basis. He was getting healthy scratched a few times. In his contract, though, he does have, only for this year, in his entry-level deal, there is a European assignment clause where he can be assigned to go play in another league over there. So he's decided to sign and play in the KHL, which really he's going to earn more money than his entry-level deal right now over in the KHL, so he's going to make more money, probably play in what he feels to be a stronger league and continue his development for this season. But in the remaining 2 years of his entry-level deal with the Rangers, there is no European assignment clause that we're aware of, so he will have to play in North America either with the New York Rangers or their AHL affiliate. Now, as we've talked about on a number of occasions, the Ottawa Senators have made it clear that they're looking for some help at the forward position, and it looks as though a couple of their veteran players very well might be on the way out, which is not a huge surprise. For example, with their game yesterday against the San Jose Sharks, part of the Hometown Hockey on Rogers Sportsnet here in Canada, they actually had Mikhail Bodker available to play, and they decided not to play him. They also scratched longtime veteran Bobby Ryan, which I believe was the first time he was a healthy scratch in his NHL career, and instead they called up Philip Schlappick from the American Hockey League to come in and play for the NHL game. So clearly Bodker, as we know, hasn't really played a lot this year. He's played a couple of games. Many speculated that he was being played in order to kind of showcase himself, to say if another NHL team would show interest, maybe generate a trade for him. That really didn't materialize. He didn't really have great showings, and we haven't really heard of any interest in the forward. And then, of course, Bobby Ryan had a decent start to the year, but really, again, like the last few years, has really not been producing and living up to his salary, living up to his potential that he showed so long ago, which he's really struggled to do for a majority of the time he's been an Ottawa Senator. So the coaches decided to make him a healthy scratch. I mean, obviously with his salary and still having a few years left on his contract, not really sure we can slap the trade label on him here just yet. I think the Senators would certainly be well open to it. I think Bobby Ryan would be open to it. It's just not an easy task to do, but we won't say it's impossible because we have seen many of the other bad contracts from around the league get swapped. So I guess we will see, but that's typically something that's more common to happen in the offseason. So we'll see what happens. Maybe the healthy scratch will wake him up, get him going, and get him producing somewhat closer to what he needs to in order to keep himself in the lineup. So we'll see. But the Senators, like I said, they're clearly looking for forward help, and they're even overlooking some of their own veterans in order for the youngsters to come up and play, which is certainly quite telling. So we'll see if they can acquire anybody else like they did with Anthony Duclair or Vladislav Nemestikov, somebody who they feel they can get for a bargain price and try to rehabilitate here and turn him into a solid NHL player. Now, I also want to touch on the Edmonton Oilers here as well. Of course, the Kurt Levins of the Edmonton Journal his recent article was discussing the fact that the Oilers, even though they're having a pretty decent start to the year, wondering when Ken Holland's going to really go out and acquire a true number 3 center iceman, which this team would really need and benefit from. If they could really bolster their depth at the center position and really spread out the secondary scoring a little bit more, it would really help them be that much stronger of a team. I mean, right now their blue line's been playing pretty well. For the most part, they've had pretty solid goaltending between Smith and Koskinen. So if they can really build up that bottom 6 a little bit stronger, then clearly they would be in a much better situation to be winning more games and likely be much more likely to remain where they are and make the playoffs. So a couple of names that were speculated by Levins include Ottawa Senator forward Jean-Gabriel Pageau, who's an unrestricted free agent, or a pending one I should say. I would think he'd be an excellent fit there, but at the same time I'm not really convinced that he's a player the Senators want to move. Also, he mentioned Tyson Jost of the Avalanche. Clearly Tyson Jost is a player who very well could step up and get a bigger role with another club. Obviously the Avalanche are quite heavy in their top 6, so not getting that type of an opportunity there might fit better with the Oilers. Another name to keep your eye on probably would be the Arizona Coyotes as well. They have a couple of forwards there that aren't really living up to great expectations, including Christian Dvorak for that matter. They very well could be available for the right price, which is just a couple of names that Levins is kind of spitballing on here, saying that the Oilers should look to the Coyotes and others, like I mentioned here, for some help at that position. We don't necessarily have any rumors to say that there's links that they've been having discussions or that they're scouting those players or anything that firm, except that just some ideas from him that the Oilers really should do. So of course, as always, I want to know what your thoughts are as well. What should the Oilers do to address that number 3 center position? Do you think any of the players he's mentioned in this article would be great fits to help them really improve their depth and improve their overall team? Now, lastly here as well, I want to touch on the Toronto Maple Leafs. We learned today from Mike Babcock that Travis Dermott is ready to return. He will return in the next game versus the Washington Capitals. So based on their overall situation with their roster and salary cap, for Dermott to come off long-term injury reserve and go back on the roster, then they're going to have to make some other roster moves. Now, as I record this video, still early in the afternoon here on Monday, so we haven't quite heard all the announcements from the Leafs. We haven't been told exactly what those roster moves might be to make the necessary space for Travis Dermott to to come back. But of course, I want to know what your thoughts are as well. What are the Leafs going to do in order to free up the necessary space? Of course, as we know, they already have a couple of players like Gravel and Patan who already cleared waivers. They could be demoted. That would certainly help create some space as well. But Zach Hyman apparently isn't too far away from returning as well. So clearly they're going to have to make some more moves like we talked about a few weeks ago. It's likely going to take up to 4 players off the current roster in order to make enough space for Dermott and Hyman both. And now we're at that time where they're about ready that they have to make some tough choices and make that happen. Like we talked about before, they're looking at some depth defensemen, maybe Justin Hall, Martin Marincin are a couple of possibilities, as well as Gravel in the forward group. You've got players like Shore and even Spezza, but I would think that they probably wouldn't want to do anything with Spezza until Tavares was returned. So that's likely a no-go for right now. Then they do have some other options, maybe like Timashov, but he's played better as well too. So it's really hard to say exactly what they do. So what do the Maple Leafs do to create the necessary space, since they have confirmed Travis Dermott will be returning for the next game? That is all your NHL news updates for today. As I mentioned here, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions on everything discussed in today's video. Let me know what your thoughts are, and we'll continue the conversation down in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.